Hi guys, welcome back to my channel, and today I am putting out some of Clif High's Alta Reports. A few years ago, he released a bunch of his reports for free for anyone who wanted to download them from his website, Half Past Human, but I don't believe they're there anymore. I got these quite a few years back when he offered them to the public for free, and so I had saved them on a computer, but if you're someone like me, I don't really retain good information by reading things, but I do like listening to them and I absorb more information, I think, by listening. And I think a lot of people are like that with so many YouTube videos and podcasts. Everyone is used to now listening to things instead of reading them. So that's why I'm putting them up on YouTube, because I couldn't really find any good audio anywhere else. So I made my own and I thought I'd share that with you. So this is just the introduction. I will put some timestamps for when the actual reading of the Alta report takes place. I'm putting it here on YouTube because I think it's really relevant to the things that are happening right now. Even though these reports are 10 years old, they become more relevant. So I think I want to kind of help put the information out there about what was in them. And now a few years have passed, people might have forgotten what was in some of his reports. And this is just a quick intro. If you want to skip ahead, I'll always put the marker of when the actual reading of the report starts as I upload these. So enjoy, and thanks for listening.
Frenzy. Forecasts for August 2016 through December 2037. Your Alta report changes. If you are a reader of the Alta reports, you will notice our new format. This new look is designed to eliminate some of the barriers for our information by reducing the complexity of the presentation. Your world changes. The winds meme is growing both in supporting sets for new winds phenomena, but also now gaining support from the sets involved in the popcorn storms. These popcorn storms, violent brief thunderstorms, are growing as a forecast occurrence to appear over these next few months. The data sets are showing that the popcorn storms will be crossing whole continents, including North America, with such speed that the water load within the storm is only grows as it crosses land, and is then released at the next shore. These popcorn storms are going to be both numerous to the point of eliciting discussion, as well as being violent to the point of creating flash floods and fires via lightning strikes. Other sets in supporting positions for rains are again pointing to the ringing of the clouds into a deluge, which is indicated to cause several miles of train tracks and supporting infrastructure to be washed away from a hillside and end up in another country near the coast. These rains destroy train sets are growing as though a major and wide meme is developing. The rains destroy sets have the largest levels of growth, with trains being but one, albeit an eye-catching, of many within the sets of destruction. There are even sets that are growing with aspect attribute sets for boats that will be sunk by rains. Other areas to receive these destroying rains include sports stadiums and port buildings, maybe airports. Many other buildings and structures are described as being flooded out or washed away. These destroying rains are slightly different from the lakes in the atmosphere in that the rains are described as being wind-driven and cumulative over time, in the sense of rain clouds keep coming, bring more rains, in a flowing river, in the atmosphere. So whereas previous Alta reports had lakes in the atmosphere which would dump out their volume in short periods, these new destroying rains are as though the rivers in the atmosphere have a specific point at which they are dumping their volume, so the effects will be as though a river suddenly appeared and swept everything away. Most of the geographic associations for these data sets have Northern Hemisphere place names, however a significant number of those are also shared south of the equator. The pace of changes affecting the planet are forecast to increase to the level of being weekly felt by a very large portion of the global population. The sets forecasting this are suggesting that our conversations over the rest of this year and into next will take a turn where, if we go back and examine them later, we will find that our weekly discussions included mention of those earth changes that personally impacted our lives. The forecasts are bringing up the language that we are going to be using, and these include earthquakes, tornadoes, yet more floods, especially those that move houses and shift populations locally. Many of these sets include the mountains of Central Europe and the mountains of France. There are new earth changes sets that are forecasting a brief and way early dip straight into winter, as snow and freezing temperatures will be the headlines for many places across the northern hemisphere in September. New episodes of planetary expansion are showing up in the data as the results are indicated to seriously impact humanity over 2016 and beyond. This year we are yet expecting to see roadways and highways that will be rendered useless due to planetary stretching effects. These are described very nearly like an earthquake, but according to the data sets there will be no local earthquakes when these stretching episodes happen. In these stretching episodes we will see asphalt roads and airport runways. Your global population changes. It's a depression out there, with a big D, and the data sets are saying that real soon, as in this year, pretty much anywhere in the whole of the Western dollar-dominated world, the D word will be entering your vocabulary, and that of your friends. The whole of the world is going to be dealing with the depression that is going to settle in over the Western dollar empire, beginning in 2016. Bear in mind, there is a lot of energy in the dollar, economic, political, and social, as well as personal. It will take a long time for the dollar to die, and as recent was said to an inquisitive billionaire, even years after the dollar has died here in USAPop, there will still be bucks circulating in Farflungistan. The depression in the developed world is described by the datasets as being labeled as D3. The meaning of the D in the D3 label is reasonably clear, the 3 less so. However, the data is much more clear in describing the bizarro world into which we are all headed. The next few months are the last hill before we settle into a long walk into the dark valley. This depression is described in varying time lengths for different countries, but in general the next 5 years are going to be a negative growth period for all of the global paper debt markets. The apparent exception on the paper debt markets is going to be within China and its SE Asia Association. The data sets here are referring to Chinese economic growth as a talent magnet for the whole planet. While there is growth showing for China, the Western dollar empire is described in very, very dark language. The dark valley language is gaining large support and is rising in its supporting position within the sets for global pop. The depression word is not a very good tell for the future, as by the time it appears in the main public media, we will already be deeply into it. Some clarity is forming up in an older, long-term data set, now shifted into shorter-term and immediacy data that describes a sari-wearing woman who will be rising to global prominence by the virtues. These virtues are described as upsetting and overturning and upending, and emptying the banksters at a global level. This sari-wearing woman is also described as smart, as in perhaps one of the top thinkers on the planet, who is basically only locally well known until these virtues begin to propel her to new social heights. These virtues are also shown as doing the uplifting of her status against her wishes. Other sets describe her as ruthless in her defense of her principles. In some of the supporting sets we find aspect attribute sets that suggest she is an enlightened being and has repeatedly been tested by death and challenges. Data sets growing in supporting positions to surprise encounter are filling with subsea survey and oceanographic representation and analysis and exposure. All of these are focusing on the surprise encounter between global pop and the subset inhabitants. While there are huge levels of cross-links over to the SpaceGoatFarts entity, where termination is all over the place from unknown to officially denied to WTF. The primary supporting cross-links are more sobering and are internal in global pop or over to TPTB entity. Again, we see that there are links between the results of the subsea survey and the Caribbean mummy shipwreck discovery, but these new surprise encounter sets are appearing in other area of ocean activities that affect global pop. The data sets are suggesting that the results of the oceanographic survey will be very revealing and will cause a viral discussion about what is going on down there, meaning subsea. See SpaceGoatFarts entity for more on this subject. We still have growing forecasts for a very dramatic cruise ship rescue involving lots of smoke, wailing people, helicopters, heaving waters, and much more drama. These rescue forecasts for this cruise ship are now starting to include some of the details about rampaging disease, and disabled crew members, and overflowing septic systems, and polluted water, and failed systems, on the boat, and many other such phrases indicating that the only part of this memory fondly considered will be having survived the trip. The way the data sets are describing this language, the underlying event should be well reported in real time with a lot of coverage. The data is growing in our shorter term types, pointing toward a maritime disaster. This disaster is apparently a sister to one we have already experienced, at least so far as model space states. This sisterhood with a previous nautical debacle is what is described as precipitating the disaster part of the soon-to-be-seen drama. The drama component is its own part of the story, as apparently this disaster will take months and months to play itself out. The drama description contains wording about the movement after the disaster as being just as entertaining as the disaster drama itself. These maritime disaster sets have been very prescient in our past work. Again, we have repeated lexical sets within the larger group for a mess of a ship disaster with much damage, distraught tourists, management freaking out, caught on video, striking someone, and other language going to the idea of a self-compounding problem once the initial screw-up happens. Some of the many side effects forecast to be arising from the sinking of this ship include huge levels of insurance and banking problems. These insurance claims and banking woes come as a result of the trauma of the drama. There are new areas in our model space that are forecasting the rise of very troubling food crop woes. These are, at this point, showing up for the southern hemisphere more so than the northern. The manifestation of these food crop problems is going to be first written about as crop failures of one kind or another, as there are various different species involved, but note that in all cases the causes cited will be wrong. The data is showing that a food crop plague has developed that apparently lives in the ecology of the crops. This may not be soil resident, or may only be so for a brief time period. The data is suggesting that the plague of crop failures even across many differing species will be able to be, in a couple of years, tracked down to a single causal agent. Many of the species will be connected by a very particular DNA subset that will, once discovered, lead to the causal agent, and to a global discussion of planetary food security at a level never before conceived. A few of the interconnections between the planetary datasets and the GlobalPop datasets have a new form of transportation emerging as a result of the Earth expansion effects. Note that this is coincident with the flying cars of the early 2020s, when invented, but these sets are showing that the invention gets into production and use very much more rapidly. This new transport is a form of a water car that will be very useful on inland waters of all kinds, but specifically is showing up as being used on canals and inland rivers. The transport does not, as of this processing, have any form of popular label, so we will define it as a multiple-legged, centipede, hydrofoiling water bug car. This vehicle is showing as being part of the new electrics and coming into widespread use in many areas, and then later, showing up as being invaluable when the roads are destroyed by earthquakes and localized stretching that renders asphalt useless in those areas in the future. Over the course of the next few months, the data is suggesting that a general trend toward increasing legal contention will emerge. This is a natural part of the process of humanity at the moment, as may be expected with all the contention in the world. However, the data sets are forecasting that a deliberate effort in the legal area is going to manifest between July 31st and October 8th that will reorient the world. This seemingly does not relate to politics, though it will influence that area. Nor is it directly related to currencies and money, but is showing as having a huge impact on paper debt and paper debt derivatives by the time the October 8th is passed. The words associated with this deliberate effort in lawsuit is transformational. The data is describing a situation in which appending and reseeding takes place at a level that will be heard about, read, understood, become aware of, by over half of humans on the planet. GlobalPop continues to get new data sets in support of the small nation that goes to monetize gold and receives support from the global smuggling community. This small nation and its financial problems that result in a gold taken as money over currency's position is indicated to be globally impacting on the financial press as well as the financial world. The financial press is specifically cited in a set that predicts panic on the faces of TV presenters and news people fainting on camera, and other effects, as though even the propaganda media was taken unawares, reacting in a raw and uncontrolled manner. These sets are filled with similar language in supporting subsets that describe a world suddenly shocked by wild price swings in materials and currencies, all revolving around gold and silver. The shock is apparently going to be real and demonstrated by the financial press as the are on camera as the paper debt world comes unglued and the numbers bounce like tennis balls across the screens of the planet. AustraliaPop problems in the housing business will be spreading from housing out to construction in some rather dramatic forms, as several stories are being forecast to come out of Australian media that will present construction to politics corruption links. This is indicated to be a scandal that will spread around Australia like mold on a crisp. The data sets are showing that corrupt, and recent re-elected, politicians will be flayed alive for some of the egregious profits that they were making under the covers as backroom owners of many rental properties. Further examples of bad behavior will also be coming out in the media, as several of the politicians will be involved in yet another sex scandal around a donated apartment from a major builder. Other issues include bad foods showing up, not as a recall, at least not according to the data, but rather as both a scandal and a national joke. In the scandal part, the data shows that bad food will have been sold quite a while ago, maybe several years, and never reported, even though the guys selling it apparently knew it was bad or tainted at the time. The scandal comes from governments that at the time also knew and were, well, maybe bribed to look the other way. Of course, this was years ago. So thus the national joke will emerge that, yes, Aussies may live in a totally corrupt governocracy, but look how tough they are to be able to eat that, and survive. ChinaPop, our data is showing that the Spratly Islands are going to emerge as being, from ChinaPop's perspective, all about energy. First, the data is suggesting that ChinaPop is going to build giant, absolutely huge, deep-sea, temperature conversion units there for production of cheap-ish electricity for the Southeast Asian region, while second, the data shows that a recent, and still secret, don't tell anyone, find of subsea rare earths is going to be mined for use in ChinaPop's energy industry. ChinaPop is also showing that a large spurt of economic growth is going to emerge that is described as being the ground support for the ChinaPop in Space initiative. While not a big employer just now, a number of data sets are going to the idea that ChinaPop is going to decide to build spaceports in several areas of China, both south and west, and that these efforts will employ tens of millions for decades as the spaceport business takes off over these next 20+ years. 3 of the 5 major efforts that ChinaPop is working on actively include the ChinaPop in Space initiative and the ChinaPop under the oceans. And ChinaPop makes energy are all showing up in the new sets in model space as soon to have been given a big boost by officialdom such that new successes are being touted internally. The data is forecasting that the ChinaPop under the oceans is going to be a key part of the other two, as the rare earths mining efforts from ChinaPop are described as serious and significant to the future of ChinaPop, and create all kinds of new inventions for under oceans habitat and under oceans industrial activities. New data sets for ChinaPop are focusing on the Chinese economic expansion efforts that are going on internally in ChinaPop. As a part of these efforts, the data is forecasting that the central authorities will be both promoting Bitcoin as well as announcing their own blockchain efforts for improved government efficiency. However, note that the idea is to use the public ledger approach to curtail internal governmental paper fraud. The ChinaPop sets are also forecasting that central authorities will be deliberately leaking word of a group of meetings conferences in which designs for a 5-year transition into a e-gold yuan are being put forward. The idea is that the central authorities are making the first movements toward a very large shift of the Chinese population into a different form of circulating money. The idea coming across is redeemable digits, or what the data is calling commodities-backed cryptocurrencies. These sets are also cross-linked over the powers that be sets and show that those bastards are going to be losing their minds along with their power base. And note that the data is indicating it will not even take the actual implementation of the 5-year plan, rather the leaks and rumors are going to be enough to precipitate the final tremble in the fragile Western banking system. EuropePop, the continuing saga of the war for Europe population, is showing as becoming increasingly violent in August and onward through fall, Northern Hemisphere. The data sets would have the first of the successful push back from the Core People's Initiative starting to alter into an army by early November 2016 with the establishing of the command structures, locally and regionally, and the introduction of the Rapid Deployment Forces. Street War goes mobile. The command structures within the data are not the only innovation showing up. We also have descriptions for the Core Peoples starting their deployment of drones. These drones will be used to monitor and to harass both the authorities and the migrants. We note that the social media forecasts within our data are suggesting that the migrant word within the core peoples groups will be replaced with invaders over the rest of 2016 as the pop war between populations, in which the populations fight not only each other, but also the authorities, heats up over 2016. The use of drones by the core peoples is indicated to cause very disproportionate fear in the invaders' migrant population. The initial reactions are described as causing great alarm among the radicalized migrants as many with weapons take to the streets shooting up in the sky. This alarm is focused on how revealing the many incidents of sky shooting are as the authorities will be watching. Further concern on the part of the radicalized migrants will come from their worries over exposure of their hidden behavior, as many of the drones will be taking videos for later replay on social media. This aspect is showing up as a hugely complicating the war on terror aspect of things for the authorities, as it will bring citizens both to the police stations and to the perpetrators' houses. In both cases, the authorities are indicated to have very bad reactions. The use of the drones in areas such as urban France and Germany include forecasts that drones will be armed in short order, and then things get really interesting with authorities and officialdom at all levels questioning who owns them, the drones above our heads. The data is forecasting that the next step in the evolution of the air tactics of pop war in Europe are going to include shotouts with and between drones over populated areas such that debris rains down and videos surface. The videos are going to be their own part of the drones in pop war story, as the drones will be bringing back video which will nearly instantly show up edited into propaganda films on all your usual social media. Further wrinkles in the drones as tactic in pop war are showing up for later in 2017, as a new technology will allow for drone hijacking such that from that point forward, no matter what stripes the drone wears, one can never be sure just who controls the critter. Then just when the ownership issue becomes the first thing everyone thinks of when they see the drones flying overhead, we are forecasting that the question of is it a drone will surface as bird-like machines, as well as transparent drones will make their appearance in the rapidly evolving pop war. The data is forecasting that this will lead to a situation over some areas of no flying bird is safe zones. Many of the new sets within the EuropePop group are all containing support for breakup of the EU. The breakup language all contains very high emotive tones values, so we are looking at very robust emotional trends that will be dominating for decades, probably for generations. These data sets are bringing up the idea of mostly a total collapse of the EU system as such. The data would have the EU as an experiment really start breaking up in early fall of this year, as pensions for the EU bureaucracy are indicated to take a huge hit that forces a radical reappraisal by all concerned within the EU bosses class. These pension shocks, horror, are themselves supported by bad money failing new sets that are showing that the EU begins a rapid fall as both the EuropePop and the USAPop come under full-on assault at the mental energy level by the developing circumstances of late July and early August. Other aspects of energy are showing up in the longer-term data as affecting all of Europe over this coming winter. The energy impacts are going to be primarily shortfalls as a very brutal winter sets in over most of the northern hemisphere. The data is indicating that at one point there will be a nearly continuous storm going from northern Europe all the way across to Siberia. The impacts of the soon-to-be falling EU currency and the upcoming brutal winter are forecast as bringing about new political alliances over the first few months of 2017. Some of these new joining ventures are indicated to have very long legs and persist for a number of decades. As model space is moved forward in time, it displays more of the longer-term data types which are lacking in details to a large extent. In the longer-term data for EuropePop, the data is forecasting that the street battles will take on aspects of focused population cleansing. Not ethnic cleansing as had been defined by the MSM propaganda press in years past, but a new form of focused removal of unwanted populations by dominant majorities. This is an aspect of what we call pop war here at HPH. Within the data sets for pop war are many sets showing that both sides are also warring against officialdom. It is this last that is showing up in the data now. The new growth in supporting sets for the pop war in Europe has values painting pictures of the officialdom under incredible pressures as the populations escalate their active street wars. The data sets are showing that Europe is going to appear as though a different reality with armed soldiers encamped across all the cities, to the point that it brings up comparisons to Nazi occupation of the previous century. Other aspects of modern life that will harken the mind back to the previous century are showing up in pop war language about a ghetto battle, with the finish being the ghetto is burned out and nearly razed to the ground by the fire. During this battle in pop war, the firefighting government workers are absent, being held back both by orders from officialdom as well as barricades for those who ignored orders and went to put out the fire. In other areas of Europe, sort of geographically centered around northern Italy and southeastern France, the data sets are showing that winter will come along with brutal force several months early and interrupt pop war with very unusual and difficult conditions. The only reason the data has a pop war connection in these sets, so far, is a small subset around the idea of a trapped munitions smuggler who will basically blow themselves up trying to stay, or get, warm in the sudden freeze. Not only will it leave a big mess to clean up, with lots of innocent people injured in the area, but it is describing as destroying a very vital road by removing a large switchback that was used by buses navigating through the mountain pass. DeutschePop. The data sets for global pop have a very large area of growth in the area of the German people, or DeutschePop. In these sets, the dominating themes are a confluence of social currents. These include the war between populations, and the war with the government, and now the war within. This last is going to an emotional condition that is described as though a person at war with themselves. The supporting language paints a picture of the conflict at an internal level within people, but also at the larger social level as the Deutsche Bank is seen to be failed, be insolvent. These sets are bringing in language for a large debate across the DeutschePop about the role of banks in the social order and the limits to be imposed on government and banks. This is apparently not the conversation that DeutschePop wanted to have with itself, and the data is describing a Germany in turmoil both at the level of language and at the level of behavior. As model space is progressed through August, the picture intensifies after a brilliant flash note flash crash. The rest of the month settles into a daily descent that is bringing all parties into a large meeting at the end of the month and ahead of perceived fiscal collapse. These sets are referring to the controllers and fiscal technicians. The rest of DeutschePop is apparently not invited to the meeting, however, according to the data sets, that is not going to stop the determined population from imposing its thoughts while on the proceedings. The data sets are describing massive collections of people gathering for this meeting. The media will label it a protest, but here in the Alta Reports the data is describing it as a revolution, and the Congress of Affected Peoples. The data sets are not providing any protest-like language in the descriptors, rather it seems to be an evolution in the politics of the street. Other sets within DeutschePop are describing language coming out the mainstream propaganda media about Bavarian hooligans who will be the center of a battle with migrants. This battle is to take shape over the course of several days of skirmishes between transiting migrants and local population. Apparently, when the battle finally occurs, it will be captured by video from some of what the data is describing as the last of the organized tours of summer. This battle is showing as being pivotal not only temporally, but also causally, as some of the individuals involved on the part of the Bavarian hooligans are going to be key influencers over the next several years of pop war. The internal dialogue within DeutschePop over the problems with both banksters and government politicians is indicated to have very large impact on the planet. It is showing as a component of the crashing cascade of the too big to fail banks and other institutions that then forces all of Western dollar empire to have the German conversation about what are banks. Do we really need them? And what can we do about the politician problem? IndiaPop. This area could actually be better named as HindPop as it affects peoples in Pakistan and Bangladesh and Kashmir as well. The IndiaPop area of the global pop entity is showing that sympathy is going to be needed for the peoples of the Hind as the too hot then too wet then too cold weather pattern reaches record levels in all categories. Up next are sets showing that weak fronts will fail to hold off an unexpected turn in weather that will be bringing large amounts of rain to all of the wrong places. Our model space shows that both the floods and the muds are going to be problems for the lowlands as the ferocity of both pick up over August. In spite of the levels of flooding seen so far this summer, the worst is yet to come, and then that is going to be followed by weather that goes beyond odd. The data is forecasting that the usual expectations for a fall weather turn are going to be put into doubt as persistent, and odd weather patterns emerge over much of the vast center of the Hind, old name of Indian subcontinent. This is indicated to force away the usual shifts in winds that bring in the fall weather patterns. Again, with most of the planet, new patterns are emerging that are going to cause shifts in the human population both in what we do and where we do it. Other areas outside of politics that are showing up as impacting IndiaPop include a giant money scandal coming out of a failing romance among Bollywood elites, not necessarily on-camera faces, is indicated to cause a large social shift over these next few months. This is only partially due to the personalities involved and their combined impact on Bollywood and Indian movie business. The real impact is forecast to come from the money empire and all of the secrets revealed that will come from its breakup and investigation. What is interesting in the data to outsiders, not able to share in the cultural shock of it all, is the roiling that will be caused in the American banks as the investigation in India starts getting mainstream press globally. New sets within the new electrics area are focusing once again on the Siberia to India to Italy connection for the field dynamics and mathematics that will be defining the 21st century, the way that the automobile and electricity defined the previous one. These sets are suggesting that some new information will be soon public that will advance this process to a greater level of visibility and move it forward into the breakout period of the early 2020s. TurkeyPop. The data sets are presenting a picture of TurkeyPop in which the explosion that should not have gone off does so, and the resulting damage is horrific. There are reasons to suspect that the explosion will be massive, but so far, nothing to suggest a nuclear explosion above ground. There is language about some very odd happenings underground related to the explosion word, and it well could be interpreted that a nuclear explosion takes place accidentally and underground. However, there are alternate interpretations for the underground word sets in this supporting chain that do not involve nuclear material. That said, we still have a large immediacy data build-up for the explosion in TurkeyPop as being regretted and accidental, and bringing an apology. The data is seemingly pointing toward a breakup, politically, of Turkey, following the unwanted accidental explosion. The new supporting sets are suggesting that Turkey is going to fall into fractional fighting as the central authorities are described as self-immolating and self-destroying. Yet again, more supporting sets within this area for the withdrawal to smaller cohorts, smaller political groups, over time meme that has been ongoing in our work here at Half Past the Amin since the beginning. USAPop. Start of the death by starvation of the two faces of the political system here in USAPop. The data growth continues for attrition and starvation of funds and loss of the donors and lies for fundraising exposed and dollar dying causes systemic fiscal diseases and other language going to the idea that the fiat currency regime is ending and is taking out removing the supports it had for the political machinery. Given the nature of the current political machinery within USAPop, and the forecasts for reactions from officialdom, the data appears to be forecasting that the rigid control over the dollar-based debt economy in the USAPop is going to suffer a breakdown as many of the bankrupt companies will actually fail without the banks having to initiate the process. The data is forecasting that cities, municipalities, will be the proximate causes for the failures as many contracts are going to go into arrears. These defaulted contracts are not limited to cities. The data sets are showing that oil companies, mainly small firms, will be not able to pay, and the resulting cascading defaults will lead to bankruptcy for some very large firms. The fail-up-the-chain language is suggesting that the failing companies will be dying on the vine due to the lack of operating cash. See markets for more discussion on this meme. Many of the new data sets are bringing up the word of collapse insofar as the USAPop is concerned. The sets are describing the USAPop having to come to reconcile their idea of about what the USA and its population are all about with the newly emerging words of depression and end of the petrodollar empire. This idea of the concept of America running into a hard wall of dying petrodollar reality is showing up in a number of the areas of model space, including the markets entity. These areas are all discussing the breakdown of the social order in the USAPop as the money deteriorates further as the many holders of dollars outside the USAPop do everything they can to send the dollars home. This repatriation effort is indicated to be the impetus behind the rising language of dying petrodollar that will cause such huge mind shift within that part of USAPop that consumes the output of the MSM propaganda media. The mind shift within the large part of the sleeping part of USAPop is indicated to be speeding up, but will nonetheless take months to even scratch the surface of SleepoPop due to its huge size and the depth of its slumber. However, that said, the impacts are showing as being both strong and quick or rapid in terms of the visible manifestation of the awakening process. The impacts are described as including pressure on the retail gold, silver, Bitcoin, and mining shares markets, along with creating a flood of orders, sometime in early 2017, for long-store foods and all forms of emergency or preparedness goods. Model space has no real good data for USAPop for the rest of this year. The data shows that there will be a near constant stream of attacks by TPTB on the population by way of lone shooters or terrorists or the next bad guy to be focused upon by the mainstream propaganda press as we go forward. The social pressures are described as increasing along with the fragility of the political economic system. This includes the election this year in USAPop. The data sets are describing this election cycle as being the most deadly ever with a number of shootings and attacks that result in fatalities as the tensions build. Other, more organic causes for the bad behavior of the population includes the massive layoffs business crash that grows across late summer and into fall. These further layoffs, and the coincident decline of the American tech flush finally kills off the hot spots in California and along the East Coast and so far as the jobs and real estate markets. The data is describing a situation in which there is a sudden or overnight feeling to the breaking of the real estate prices. As these high-end lifestyle centers also take a financial hit, the data shows that bad behavior increases rapidly in an organic fashion. This is also showing as being used by the powers that be to redirect emotional energies into other areas of their choosing. The crashing as it is perceived of the real estate markets within USAPop is indicated to cause huge levels of social distortion over these next few years. Part of the problem comes from a large segment of the society attempting for far too long to maintain the conditions dictated by their normalcy bias. This is going to create a very strange situation in which markets will be very reactive in the sense of responding to price changes. The idea coming across is that the central authorities have propped up the markets in the USAPop for so long that no one knows what anything is really worth, and it will take some time to work this out after the relaxing of the grip of the central authorities this November. The data shows that markets will go through wide and wild swings, first attempting to maintain prices at or near their former peaks, then reacting to panic and producing very fast drops in prices. In some areas the prices of high-end property is showing as being down over 80% by the end of the year and still no sales. It comes down to price discovery. What is property worth when the money is worthless? These areas of model space are showing a really bizarre condition where in some areas there are huge levels of price increases as the property owners accept the devaluation of the dollar, but not their property, and thus, in dollar terms, escalate the for sale price daily as the currency degrades. And yet, mere miles away, will be people attempting to sell at realistic levels just go get on with their lives, and so will take the approach of reducing the price to something closer to the amount of cash actually available in their local region. Both of these conditions are indicated to be steps along the road to barter for real estate. As part of our real estate sets, we have some new areas that are forecasting that apps will be set up from the major listing agencies to instantly alert buyers to price changes as the pricing is dropping so rapidly it will be difficult for both sellers and buyers to track the exchange value of real estate. These sets are indicating that apps will be providing the price discovery for real estate by commodities in various areas where currencies are not circulating widely enough to warrant a dollar, or other currency, price, so the apps will provide the universal constants of Bitcoin, gold, and silver. Also please note that within these sets there are groups that continue to reinforce the idea of silver more valuable than gold. Many other sets within our new data are also reinforcing the idea of value. Some of these sets are forecasting that something of an urban gold mining will be taking place as people go through old inventories of all kinds looking for items of value, especially forgotten precious metals. These scavenger hunts are going to reveal some very large treasures, in the future, in some junk that will be forgotten today or tomorrow. Some of these finds are described as including a parts stash for luxury watches including lots of gold-plated housings. This discovery will somehow make the news then as it will contain more than simply history or gold. There are large numbers of new sets for chaos and social disruption in USAPop that are forecasting some form of political chaos theater that will begin in late August, likely as a side effect of the ongoing economic crumbling, that will then build in displayed emotional tension over September and finally start erupting within the social body right around the equinox. The data sets would have the USAPop fully embroiled into the unknown political chaos scenario by the end of the first week in October. The political chaos theater sets are filled with all kinds of disparate details showing various different reactions to the political chaos theater rather than the central action within the political realm at the time. This is very likely due to the emotional intensity of politics here in USAPop at this time. The resulting chaos from whatever is the effective in-the-moment cause for the political theater brings USAPop to a point of stark realization that is just preceding the movement of the panic to own gold and or silver and or Bitcoin language down to the mainstream population of USAPop. Markets temporally coincident with the European street wars. The data shows that Bitcoin is going to breach the barrier and take out $688 to the BTC. This is also being described as temporally coincident with the first of the previously forecast air gaps in the price of silver. These air gaps are indicated to be large enough to cause comments in the mainstream propaganda press, and these discussions are showing as being prompts to bank runs in Europe. These bank runs are also showing as affecting vaults of all kinds as the population becomes nervous about the certainty of institutions. The bank run is also showing as impacting gold and silver sales as the population is indicated to take money from banks to put into precious metals. A new pattern of very large growth in supporting shorter-term and immediacy data values are forecasting that the global bond markets will be going bluey, exhaustion terminal weakness, by mid-October of this year. Other sets are showing that the global bonds markets are going to be barbecued by mid-October of 2016 as the data shows that rates on sovereign bonds begin to compete with each other over the months of August and September. The data is indicating that the precious metals and the Bitcoin markets are going to take away the reflection of brightness on paper debts. These sets are going further to the idea of bondholders who are freaking out as the banking crisis spreads from country to country in mere days. The movement of the sets in support of the debt system death are showing that the major brunt of the depression wave, which is the global fiscal system reaching the point of internal crisis, is going to occur over 4 terrible days in a single week. While the crisis is going to play out over years, the data is focusing upon a single, upcoming, week as being the first step into global fiscal collapse. In spite of the many voices, minions, and officialdom of the powers that be, proclaiming that this or that is the cause for the sudden crisis collapse crash, there are clear sets going to the idea that the global population will not be buying the excuses from the minions and politicians. The data sets are forecasting that the gambling experience of the millions of private traders across the planet is going to be so violent an expression as to prompt actual heart attacks. Stated another way, the sudden rush into the crisis period, collapsing fiscal structures, causes day traders and pensioners to be both wiped out as well as shocked, nearly to death. One of the new words that appears in many of the subsets of the market's entity is reversal. This word is within many of the subsets that are connected to the trading subsets of the markets. The appearance of the reversal word is going to the idea of the sudden reversal of trends within paper debt markets. These reversal descriptors are forecasting that the pattern that the central authorities are creating by their massive buying which caused the reversal to occur. These sets are forecasting that the reversal pattern itself will become, shortly before the big problem, a trade trend. Again, many of the small traders, also called retail, will be wiped out and destroyed as the reversal patterns will become widely recognized just ahead of their disappearance. It is the disappearance of the reversal patterns for the markets that is linked in the data sets to the crisis and the instant asset price freeze problems. There are many new subsets for giant shifts in the values relative of the fiat currencies that will be participating within the trading markets. These fiat breaks are showing as causing wild swings in the real prices for energy and nearly everything else as the markets become unhinged at the exchange level. These new sets are subsets for a growing chain that has fiat currencies being near to reaching their limits in continuing confidence. The data sets are forecasting that the runs on banks in the EuropePop are but the first and are the spark that will set off a global Western brush fire. At its core, it is the failing fiat currencies that is causing the forecast shift in economic fortunes. This is showing up in our long-term data as a big move eastward to where currencies are real. These sets are describing a situation in which the fake and dying fiat of the Western dollar empire will be fading away as new energies flow into the currencies of the Eastern nations. This is going to be reflected in our lives by less opportunity available in Western republics and a harder scramble for those that remain as the dollar empire will be bleeding out talent and human energy into the Eastern world. A small side note on the talent part of the bleed out, or what used to be called a brain drain in the last century. In our data sets we have a group of foreign scientists working in ChinaPop with ChinaPop engineers who are going to succeed according to the data sets, in producing a device that will propel technology along a huge new direction. However interesting this new direction may be, the point of discussing it here is that this new technology is going to require silver in a way that no other metal will suffice. Temporally near to the hype about this new tech appearing, we have data sets indicating that silver starts to go parabolic in its relationship to gold, thus heading for better than parity. There are some indications that this new technology is associated with our previously forecast wireless telepathy. According to our model space, We are going to be seeing more of the failure cancer hitting the Western business world over these next 12 months than we have seen in the last 5 years, as the credit freeze is being forecast as morphing into a cash crisis at the open door level of even major corporations. This is forecast to include even the global giants of the fast food industry, where the data sets are describing regions where so little cash circulates that business dries up and franchises scream. These sets are painting a picture of franchises where the employees outnumber customers on a 2-to-1 basis for weeks at a time. The issue described by the data is one that has been continuously referenced for the last five or more years and is the dying of the G-based currency supply. This trend toward reduced cash circulation at the lower levels of the consumer society is being described as a form of economic disease that has never been forecast by the economics subset of society, and they are apparently going to be totally blindsided and gobsmacked when it is finally recognized. The dying currency's flow disease is an actual disease in the meaning of a condition of ill health resulting from the inability of the economy achieve homeostasis. Of course, we know the why of this particular economic disease state, the central banksters and authorities. However much one may be tempted to think that the evil banksters are going to get their deserved results, and how this is a good thing, it is also quite true that the banksters had no idea that a disease state or condition could develop within the abstraction of the body financial. The main symptom of the disease, and the one used to measure its progress through a population, is the dying of the circulatory system. Within our data sets, this dying circulatory system is very much described as arteries and veins of commerce. Again, the data is focusing on the actual perishing and lack of cash money, in any currency, being circulated through the system. The data sets are saying that it is this aspect of the current state of central authorities management that has been totally overlooked, and that is going to cause financial gangrene to appear throughout the Western business system. The appearance of both the symptom and the central authorities' reaction to it will be seen, according to Model Space, as we move into September 2016. In related areas of the markets entity, we have a large amount of new data that is forecasting that the rapid and somewhat unexpected rise in silver prices in US dollars over the month of August will be causing a number of companies to go out of business as their shorts in the silver markets go uncovered. This is showing as causing a chain of defaults that is going to cascade upward into the large players in the commodities markets. This defaulting pressure is going to force the banks, especially the bullion banks, to frantically try to obtain coverage for their sinking positions. The data sets are forecasting that there will be no silver or gold to purchase to make good the systemic problems, and that the governments of the planet are going to be deeply involved in the failing silver shorts positions by mid-September 2016 at an official and public level. The major problem emerging from the market's entity datasets is shaping up as a real significant issue for all rational humans. The data is forecasting that we will have businesses failing from lack of cash, yet able to get debt, but not able to service it. And the cash drought will happen so suddenly that the major banks and corporations are not prepared for it, and will also suffer as the level of churn in the system drops to nearly nothing. Areas like real estate, and gambling, and convenience stores and such will be the first to feel the cash drought shaping up. While the data forecasts many of them sounding the alarm, and even screaming to governments about it, more the bigger guys, the data would have it be way too late by that point to be corrected. So businesses failing from the bottom up. Giant corporations and giant bankster organizations withering at the extremities from cash drying up in their veins. Governments being beat up by their owners, no, not you, rather the big core that pay the real money the politicians need to live and be the best sociopaths they can be. All of this leading to? Nope, not a crash like one might suppose. Rather, the data is suggesting that it will be a form of holing or puncturing in which whole parts or sections of economic activity also die off with the slowing circulation of real money. Yet the major markets indices reach new all-time highs? And continue to do so? All the while, the central bankster authorities are buying up everything possible by any channels available. Paper floods the world, and the proof of this will soon be the gold and silver prices, which will be racing to reach that of the Dow. The data has BTC or Bitcoin being the primary barometer for the financial system over the months of August and September. In the first part of August, the data shows that BTC rises up through $688 in US dollar terms even as the dollar is rising against other, dollar-dependent fiat. Worth noting is the gradually lengthening divergence between Russian, Chinese, and Indian currencies and the US dollar. So while the dollar is rising against the pound, the yen, and the other dollars, and the euro, it will be losing ground against the yuan, and the ruble and the rupee. However bizarre such a situation may sound now, it is the failure of the petro part of the petrodollar that is indicated to be the killer of the dollar part. But not now, more dollar woes later in the year. As of this point, the longer-term data sets are arguing for hyperinflation to be seriously ballooning the US dollar by year's end, with all of the anticipated consequences. Not only do these consequences include rising dollar prices for metals and Bitcoin, but the forecasts are that the infrastructure for the financial system based out of the Western capitals will be failing due to the failing fiat currencies. So while the major Western indices will be making new all-time highs repeatedly, the very platforms supposedly supporting their activities will be failing with increasing frequency. These are also all coincident with the waking of the sleeping Western populations at an increasing rate, such that very large demand pressures are indicated to be put on the precious metals markets as well as all things emergency or survival. Some of the firms catering to this niche market will be so overwhelmed with new business as to nearly break down in trying to cope with the sudden growth. Further, the picture includes long lines at physical precious metals stores, as well as at pawn shops, and any place one may expect to be able to obtain either silver or gold. A very curious thing is about to emerge, and while it is really a global pop discussion due to the why that is involved, which is to say pop war, mostly should really start calling it religiosity war, but that is too much typing, is about to get air support. The reason that this section is in the markets entity has to do with its huge impact on business globally. The rush to air support via drones for both reconnaissance and tactics is showing up in our shorter and longer-term data as producing huge new breakthroughs in both battery technology, as well as sensor response software as the drone industry gears up for demand shock. The sudden demand for both drones and drone knowledge is indicated to have a really large impact on the user communities in Pop War as well. The lack of drone operators will become evident as there will be something of a crash frenzy coming up in which, while the markets are crashing metaphorically, so will thousands of drones be actually crashing as many groups attempt to rapidly overcome the drone gap. Other drama forecast to manifest in markets includes the appearance of angry mobs that will be confronting heads of technology companies. This will appear as a wide meme over the next 6 months or so, as the population starts rebelling against the technology companies and their dictatorial behavior. Other aspects of this include rebellions by businesses over the censorship and the theft of their clients, even though they are clients also of the platform being used. This is showing up as something of a huge battle that is going to be causing widespread changes in how money flows in businesses to businesses transactions on the internet. The level of impact is showing as huge in our intensity and spread values for the emotions brought about by this fight among giants, and these emotions are all summing in the very extreme region of angry. The data is showing that the anger will so deeply pervade the boardroom as to bring about an online PR, also political, war of words that will be shocking to most as well as producing profound changes in billing, advertising, sales, and marketing which are forecast to affect the net for the rest of this decade and well into late 2020s. Think of any of the alphabet names involved in the top tier of technology to the public companies, and the handful, think 5, at the top are going to be sent scrambling by this upcoming earthquake in how technology is presented, sold, and billed across the internet. The data for the markets are growing in large new areas for the early 2020s to experience a real oil shock. This new form of oil shock in the first 4 years of the 2020s is being described as resulting from the Earth expansion effects as well as shift into very much more cost-effective energy sources, many of which are being described in the data as field transformation effect generators. These are apparently a new form of energy extraction which can seriously multiply the amount of electricity available from solar and wind sources. The result of all of the oil extraction problems as well as the alternative forms of energy are showing as creating the conditions in which oil as a commodity is being less burned for joules than atomically burned to produce new materials. The data in the markets entity continues to grow in support of the idea that the energy shift that humanity undertakes over these next 8 years is going to produce the largest ever crash in the steel industry as tens of thousands of large bulk fuel carriers have to be recycled. Further issues arise in that new steel emerges in the form of near-transparent metals destined to go into construction at all levels. These new metals are showing as being yet another side effect of the field effect mathematics that will emerge over these next 10 years. These new metals are described as being incredibly thin yet have active, or dynamic, fields in their surfaces which make them anti-fragile or self-healing to some extent. A big transition that we will be discussing for years. As the energy shock beginning in 2016 progresses, the data is forecasting that an increasing segment of the global pop is devoting its time to energy, its usage, and its future. As the energy shock moves through our very fragile economic system over these next 4 years, the data shows that the infrastructure starts to crumble at such a rapid rate as to compound the problem of the dwindling energy supplies on the already devastated economy. The energy shock and oil shock problems are showing as beginning this fall with a series of oil disasters that, while not linked causally, will appear temporally linked such that the observer will get a sense of a threshold being crossed. Thereafter, the rising energy costs are indicated to be a key determining factor for markets globally until late in the 2027. At that point, the new field generators will be spreading across the population and the shift away from energy scarcity at an individual level starts. Prior to the first announcements of the field transformation affects mathematics and its practical applications, the data is describing a very bleak view of humanity's future that develops and settles in on the markets. This view is going to be coincident with the broader use of the word depression in both mainstream propaganda press as well as alternative real media. These two memes in the data are described as both arising from the same source, which is to say, the Federal Reserve Bank's TurkeyPop and their masters. This bleak view of the future is forecast as manifesting itself in the markets as a certain feeling of desperation or seeking escape, even in ruin. The data has a great deal to say about how this mindset is going to alter the flow of capital around the planet for a number of years, and how the creeping despair is going to drive speculative investment into some pretty bizarre schemes indeed. And that is saying a lot considering the reality in which we live now. Some of these schemes will include extraplanetary diaspora ideas and even attempts to leave, as well as many other forms of attempted escape from the diminishing future. The data has piled up around this idea of a mental point of view change that will be the cause of future market abnormalities. In spite of the forecast for a collective mental walkabout in the markets, the good news is that the data sets are forecasting the breakdown of the control infrastructure that currently dominates the markets, at least the Western dollar empire ones. The breakdown is forecast to come from the self-compounding effects of the computer trading. Without delving too deep into the technical part of the forecast, the idea coming out of these sets is that a relatively rare event of a resonance developing within software across different platforms is going to cause a trade synchronization that will cause prices to rise and fall by the millisecond in a pattern of increasing swings both up and down until the first of the circuit breakers is triggered. Thereafter, when restarted, even after hard resets, the data is forecasting that the algo sync up is going to be repetitiously a problem to the point that major markets re-engineering must be completed before they can be reopened for more than mere minutes at a time. These data sets would seem to be more effective for this winter than fall, but if so, it will be late winter as there are sets placing it as being late in the season. There are a number of sets for silver being associated with the energy sector in new ways. Not only in some new energy performance devices, but also at a level that we still have showing up as unknown or undefined or unnamed as of this processing. What makes this section worth discussing is yet more language within it for silver being more valuable than gold. Note that this data within this set is temporally coincident, not necessarily causally related. The market's entity has new growth in the longer-term sets for a global monetary reset, however this is not the planned events of the powers that be. Rather, the data sets are describing a crashcade in which the plans of TPTB are pushed forward by manifesting events, but even so, model space is forecasting that TPTB screw it all up in terms of both timing and planning such that the global monetary reset begins not as they had planned, but rather with a run to cash at any ATM globally that continues to work. There are some number of links to the unexpected, unwanted, accidental explosion long forecast to occur in Turkey as being the prompt to the emotional frenzy that is described as descending on Western humanity as a result of the explosion and the horrific damage. But the data is quite clear the horror of the explosion is not the real cause for the intensity of the emotional reaction, but rather it will be the clear sign that the world has changed to those humans still asleep. The data sets are describing an emotional frenzy to own silver, and also to own gold, and to own Bitcoin. These sets are showing up ahead of the run to cash sets by over a week, but probably not as much as 2 weeks. These sets are forecasting that the jittery money will know beforehand and be desperate to get out before the crash. These sets are independent of the Turkey sets, and are merely temporally associated. The panic-to-own sets are describing the gold channels as being drained from both ends as first the large buyers run into walls of no metal to be had in quantity, then the retail buyers run into empty stores that only want to buy gold not sell it. Even more descriptive, the retail stores are being characterized as gold and silver vacuums reaching out into the population. The data sets are describing the panic to own gold and panic to own silver as being fear-driven. The ratio of fear sets to the emotional value sums for gold and silver are at all-time highs within these sets. These sets are ballooning as model space is moved forward. Within our work, fear is one of the primary drivers and as such is easily tracked as it rises out of the emotional aggregates. The fear driver for the pending panic and desperation to own metals in Bitcoin is not a sudden, impulse shock, rather this is a deep-seated fear that rises from the root of dread rather than terror within our hierarchy and as such has the more energetic aspects of tension and anxiety. Part of model space does have some numerics for silver as well as a forecast that silver will lead Bitcoin and gold in the next leg up. The lead is defined as being a daily percentage movement up. The idea coming across is that silver will be having slightly larger moves by percentage on a daily basis than either gold or Bitcoin. SpaceGoatFarts. As the data sets for the GlobalPop entity were being processed, it became clear that a different level of interest in the oceans was going to develop within GlobalPop and that this new focus would have SpaceGoatFarts entity right at the center of it. These sets in GlobalPop entity terminate in SpaceGoatFarts entity in areas such as officially denied, and officially rejected, and officially redacted, as well as more emotional bad reactions by authorities when questioned about subsea activities. These sets are pointing toward an oceanographic resource survey of some form that is going to produce vast quantities of data which will produce thousands of pictures, some of which are indicated to make onto the internet where bright and sharp eyes pick up on subsea inhabitants and their activities, which are indicated to include lighted structures, presumably buildings, as well as indications of active construction. As may be expected, this will start a whole new round of conspiracy theories and official denials, as well as viral cults. New ST data is describing a new form of reactive electronics technology, in which the device will become aware that a human wants to use it, and turn on to a functions desired. What is making this interesting in the data sets is the idea coming across that the device is going to use the previously forecast wireless telepathy to sense the human interest. Many of these sets have supporting sets going to the idea of reverse-engineered, space alien, technology as the source for these new capacities of our daily technology. Yet more data sets appearing about strange stuff under seas that will be brought up, both as actual things and as video or images. These strange things from under the oceans is a very wide meme and is still supporting the idea of intelligence down there that we are going to encounter and meet at some point in our longer-term future. However, in the immediacy and shorter-term data types in this now, we have more sets showing that mystery is going to be surfacing almost weekly from late summer onward as conditions converge to place human attention back onto the oceans. Likely it will start with a focus on the Atlantic Ocean, then spread about over the next few weeks. Some of the strange things indicated to be brought up will include official denials that are forecast to set off a viral eruption of speculation about sudden, mysterious, and nonsensical movements of US and other major navies around the planet. Another recurring meme has new growth in both the SpaceGoatFarts and the Terra entities, and this is for new lands to be emerging, as well as new sources, subsea, for rare earth metals. The data sets are suggesting that the current Chinese interest in the Spratly Islands in the South China Sea are going to be revealed to be, at least in part, directed there due to a rare earths metals deposit that they will soon set about mining. We still have growth in the set for a fly-by of Earth by a space alien cruise ship full of space alien tourists. The really cool part of the set is that the data is showing that so many humans will see the slow passage that the idea of aloneness will be gone forever. The SpaceGoatFarts sets are now showing that there will be huge problems from this event for the global IslamPop as well as many of the Catholics and other deeply religious humans. The issue for IslamPop has to do with the, at the time of the event, ongoing religious internal warfare within Islam and the Middle East. Apparently several of the bright lights on each side decide to use the space alien cruise ship visit as some form of divine sign for their followers. The data shows that the outcome of this effort is going to pretty much thereafter define the word unexpected. The Vatican is growing as a context within SpaceGoatFarts entity as model space is moved through these next 4 years. The data has increasingly negative picture to display as we go forward into the last few years of this decade. The position of the Vatican relative to global affairs and even the Catholic Church is indicated to degrade very rapidly beginning after November of 2016. A large part of the problem is indicated to be the near-instant cessation of illegal funds as the dollar dies. Again, notwithstanding any previous internet nutters calling for mass arrests, the data sets are indicating that as the dollar dies, and corruption becomes exposed, and even more important, as the criminals lose purchasing power over people, the data shows that the criminal class begins to slowly be rounded up and put on trial. A very good thing indeed. Conclusion: the final staging. It seems from the data qualifiers and quantifiers reaching such extreme levels within the intensity and duration values that we are reaching a crescendo of activity. This is seemingly being reflected back from emerging events. From the perspective of our data, it seems that we are witnessing a final staging. To those who have not worked backstage, the final staging is that point in the production where the last scene change has to be rushed into place behind the curtains even as they are swinging briefly shut. The issue for the stage hands is to not interfere with the emotional tone that the author and players have managed to create within the audience. The pressure on the final staging is incredible as it is a very carefully timed pause to allow for a dip in the emotions before the last scene unfolds and the play reaches denouement. A bad staging crew, or any accident of timing in the final staging, can ruin the effect trying to be created across the whole of the play. So, for those of us in the cheap seats up front and off to the side, we get the occasional glimpse of the backstage crew during the final staging, and the impression coming out now is of a desperate frenzy. About predictive linguistics and our methods. Predictive linguistics is the process of using computer software to aggregate vast amounts of written text from the internet by categories delineated by emotional content of the words. Predictive linguistics uses emotional qualifiers and quantifiers, expressed as numeric values, for each and all words phrases discovered filtered in the aggregation process. Over 80% of all the words gathered will be discarded for one or more reasons. Predictive linguistics works as no-conscious expressions are processed through the software. Rather, the contexts discussed within the report in the form of entities and linguistic structures, see below, are read up in the various intake software programs, and the emotional sums of the language found at that time are retrieved. Words that are identified within my system as descriptors are passed through the processing as well. These descriptor words, in the main, are those words and phrases that provide us with the detail sets within the larger context sets. As an example, the word prophecy may be read up by our software at a sports-oriented forum. In that case, perhaps, due to the emotional sums around the context, and the emotional values of the word itself within the lexicon, it would be put into the contextual bin within the database as a detail word. Note that the context of the use of the word in the sports forum is lost in the process and is of no use to us in these circumstances. What occurs is that the word is picked up as being atypical in its context, therefore of high potential leakage of future value. The way this works is that most sports forum language about future events would be statistically more likely to use words such as bet, as in I bet this XXX will be outcome, or I predict, or I think that XXX will happen. So it is the context plus emotional values plus rarity of use within the context that flags words for inclusion in the detail level of the database. Further, it is worth noting that most detail level words are encountered in our processing mere days before their appearance. Within the IM data primarily, and then within ST data next. But a preponderance are discovered within the IM time period. Perhaps an artifact of our processing, if so, one not explored due to lack of time, Cosmic Joke noted. Words are linked by their array values back to the lexicon using our set theory model, see below, and the language used within the interpretation, detail words accepted, derives from the lexicon and its links to the changing nature of contexts as they are represented within our model. Predictive linguistics is a field that I pioneered in 1993. The software and lexicon has been in continual change-update mode since. This is due to the constantly changing nature of language and human expression. Predictive linguistics works to predict future language about, perhaps, future events, due to the nature of humans. It is my operating assumption that all humans are psychic, though the vast majority do nothing to cultivate it as a skill, and are likely unaware of it within themselves. In spite of this, universe and human nature has it that they leak prescient information out continuously in their choice of language. My software processing collects these leaks and aggregates them against a model of a timeline, and that information is provided in this report. The ALTA report is an interpretation of the asymmetric trends that are occurring even this instant as millions of humans are typing billions of words on the internet. The trends are provided in the form of a discussion of the larger collections of data, dubbed entities, down to the smallest aspect attribute swept up from daily discussions within that context. Within the Alta report format, detail words are provided as noted below. Phrases and idiomatic expressions are also provided as details. In the main, geographic references are merely summed, and if deemed pertinent, the largest bag in the collection is discussed as a probable or possible location to the events being referenced within the details. In our discussions, the interpretation is provided in a nested, set theory, fuzzy logic pattern. Definitions, aspects attributes are collections of data that are within our broader linguistic structures and are the supporting sets that provide our insight into future developments. The aspect attribute sets can be considered as the brought along serendipitous future forecasts by way of links between words in these sets and the lexicon. Entities are the master sets at the top of our nested linguistic structures and contain all reference that center around the very broad labels that identify the entity, markets, GlobalPop, and SpaceGoatFarts, as examples. Lexicon is, at its core level, the lexicon is a digital dictionary of words in multiple languages alphabets stripped of definitions other than such technical elements as parts of speech identifiers. The lexicon is quite large and is housed in a SQL database heavily populated with triggers and other executable code for maintenance and growth. Human language expands continuously, so the lexicon must as well. Conceptually, at the Prolog software engine processing level, the lexicon is a predicate assignment of a complex, multi-dimensional array of integers to labels, each of which is a word within the lexicon. The integers within the 8x8x10 level array structure are composed of emotional qualifiers, which are assigned numeric representations of the intensity, duration, impact, and other values of the emotional components given by humans to that word. And also contain emotional quantifiers, which are assigned numeric representations of the degree of each of the cells' level of emotional assignment. Spiders are software programs that once executed are self-directing, within programmed limits, thus are called bots, and within these constraints are allowed to make choices as to linguistic trails to explore on the internet. The job of the spiders is to search, retrieve and pre-process, part of the exclusions process that will see 90% of all returned data eliminated from consideration in our model, the linguistic bytes, 2048 words phrases in multi-byte character format, which are aggregated into our model space when processing is complete. List of entities explored in this report. GlobalPop. The GlobalPop entity represents the linguistic sets within the data that are focused on the future of humanity, local or global. The local future focused language is aggregated into our global future language sets. This entity is independent of language, alphabet, or script form, and thus is our deepest and broadest set for emotional quantifiers and qualifiers about humanity's future. USAPop, and any other nation-state territorial reference. All subsets of the populace of the planet, within our model space are identified by either a geospatial term such as a regional terrestrial label, e.g., AlpinePop, or a geopolitical label, e.g., CanadaPop. These are used to isolate the subset of the global populace to which the terms are being applied in the forecast. The terrestrial references are frequently used to provide a context of shared views concerns, as in those things all mountain-dwelling people will have in common separate from other humans. Markets. The markets entity is a superset of linguistic structures covering paper debt markets of all kinds, commodity trading markets, physical swap markets, currency usage, within populace, digital currency developments, new technology and fintech. Terra. The Terra entity is the master set for all structures that relate to the planet and the physical environment of planet Earth. This master set frequently and increasingly has extensive cross-links to the SpaceGoatFarts entity. SpaceGoatFarts. This master set is where all data that fits under the context of and arrives. Our processing discovered significant amounts of data of the and over 2003, which led to the creation of the separate entity view labeled SpaceGoatFarts. As may be expected, this set contains the references to UFOs, Area 51, breakaway civilization, and other woo-woo subjects. Data types. IM equals immediacy data with forecasting effectiveness from 3 days to the end of the 3rd week. Error range is 4 weeks. ST equals shorter term data with forecasting effectiveness from the 4th week out through and inclusive the end of the 3rd month, from date of interpretation. Error range equals 4 months. LT equals longer term data with forecasting effectiveness from the end of the 3rd month out through and inclusive of the end of the 19th month. Error range equals 19 months. Terms employed. Cross-links, links from one cell in the database and its software representation to another due to a shared linguistic structure or pattern. Linguistic structure. In my model space, a linguistic structure is a master set and all its contained subsets, also known as directly held subsets. At the very highest level, each and all entities within my model are linguistic structures, which, in their turn, are composed of many subsets of other linguistic structures. Model space allows for 256 layers of nesting of these sets and subsets, each of which can and may be a complex set of its own. Obviously, the model is derived from object-oriented programming at its highest level. Metadata layer. In model space, when a meme appears directly held in numerous sets, at the same level of support, it is labeled as a metadata layer. These layers can be thought of as a common linguistic structure that forms with differing supporting sets in the various entities. For clarity, a meme in Terra entity would not have the same supporting sets as that same meme in the GlobalPop entity, but both would be part of the larger metadata layer that the meme reveals. Model space. In the interpretation, the data sets are represented on screen in a virtual box fashion in which a 3D box is drawn and the lexicon-linked words from the latest data processing are shown within the 3D box by position and color, brightness and hue of the individual pixels. Using an algorithm of my own design and the predicate calculus of the Prolog programming language, model space is populated by these database representations in a manner that resembles scatter graphs, but at a 3-dimensional level. By toggling on or off several advanced features of our 3D box software, the various levels of data, and cross-links and other technical elements may be displayed. MOM, Model of Model Space. In the very first public release of information from my process, a self-referencing loop was created by internet articles about the release, and thus the next time the spiders were invoked, the process crashed on self-referential, circuitous references to my own work. As a corrective measure, MOM, Models of Model Space, was devised as my very improvement on the process. MOM holds a copy of my interpretation as well as links to areas on the net to exclude from consideration within the predictive linguistic work. Set. Our approach involves the use of complex, fuzzy, set theory originating in the software industry's quest for intelligent machines or AI, artificial intelligence. In our approach, the fuzzy sets are based on the ability to define such concepts as near, close to, about, and like among many others which provide me the ability to assign a numeric representation as a quantifier to human emotions, which are the key element to future forecasting from predictive linguistics. Temporal echo. These are linguistic echoes across time that will reference the same, previously forecast, meme and its emotional parameters. The language manifest in both instances, that is, the temporal, meme, anchor and its echo will be related to each other, though frequently the repeating echo is larger in both scope and intensity. In some cases, the meme is completed in our predictive linguistics sense of that word by the echo phase of the meme. TM equals temporal marker. Think of this as a bookmark against which you may remember specific details of the forecast. These are chosen due to some, more or less, easily identified linguistic telltale that we expect to show up in the forecast language within media discussions.